or service is created, and you need to have the business element. It has to make sense. You have to have the business model. It has to be sustainable. You have to make money, right? We have to live. And then the technology has to be there. So when these three things are coming together in some combination where they intersect, hopefully you get something that is an innovation, okay? So for example, Airbnb, okay? Airbnb, how did it start? Do people know how it started? So it was two young guys, like my husband, they were at art school in New York, and there was a big conference in New York, and there was no hotels, no places. And they were poor students, and so they had some sofas, and they thought, we can make some money, and we can meet some really cool people. So they wanted to use unused space. They wanted to meet people, and they wanted those people to have a local experience in New York. So they just put up this thing, Airbnb, stay on my couch, pay this much. And also they made friends. They realized, the technology is there, Facebook, right? So the technology was there to develop trust. I know someone from Facebook who knows someone in Medellin, and I'm going to stay at the friends of the friend's house. So you had the human need was leading. It was the most important part is that people wanted something like this. And then the business model was there because a lot of people were doing it. Now Airbnb is worth billions. They do not own, well they do now, but they didn't own one hotel, not one accommodation, right? So it's a new business model. This is really disruptive innovation. It completely changed the hospitality industry, right? And it's through an idea of finding people that people wanted to be locals, and they wanted to have friends, and they had all this unused space, and they could make some money. So we see this a lot. We see this in eBay. We see this on different kind of platforms. It's called the shared economy or the collaborative economy. The internet is now, and social media is now connecting suppliers and customers on a platform, right? Okay.
En resumen, es una introducción hacia lo que es innovación, donde el mejor ejemplo que se puede encontrar es uno como Airbnb, donde unos jóvenes decidieron que porque en Nueva York estaban haciendo una conferencia y no había suficiente acomodación, decidieron hacer una plataforma sin tener propiedad de ningún hotel, sin tener propiedad de nada, diciendo, hombre, usted puede conectar una persona y esa persona le va a dar a usted acomodación aquí o en cualquier parte. Y ha sufrido o ha surgido desde una cosa en un garage hasta la compañía de hoy que vale billones de dólares. Y por eso entonces hay que la innovación, y Molin va a hacer énfasis en el centrado al ser humano, que va de mano con la educación.
I'll just also mention that maybe before business or technology was driving innovation, before in the 80s and 90s, maybe, right? So all of a sudden you have this technology, and that you made things that you wanted people to want, right? So when we call human-centered innovation, it's starting with the needs of the people, right? But sometimes we don't really even know what we need. So how do we kind of figure out, like, for example, we're talking about innovation in education. The students don't really know what they need, right? So how do we get behind this? How do we start to really understand ourselves and users and people? Okay. So we're going to talk about innovation specifically in education. So I would like to know, what does innovation mean to you in education? Can you kind of think about a time that you did something in the classroom that you think was innovative, or you saw another teacher do something that you thought, oh, that's new, that's innovative? Anyone?
When you think out of the box, when you do things that are not common.
Yeah, for example?
For example, not following rules. like
Okay.
specific structured tasks, but feeling your students and what their needs are instead of what's fashion or what's in trend.
So kind of changing your lesson so that, and flipping that around. Is that innovative?
I believe so.
Maybe. Yeah, could be, depends on it. Anyone else? Anyone else kind of think about what is innovation in education? New curriculum. What kind of new curriculum?
Dance classes.
Mm-hmm.
What, lo que hace Marcela, no sé cómo.
Survival.
Well, yeah, that's different. When I was in high school.
You never, yeah. Okay. So,
maybe trying to adapt the curriculum like to their interests, because, for example, in my literature classes, ninth graders were having a lot of difficulties with Romeo and Juliet. And what I worked with them was listening to Taylor Swift's song called Love Story. And when they saw the video and heard the story, that gave them like a view of Romeo and Juliet, not through the old language, but through that song. So I brought like something that interested them in
yeah.
order to catch their attention
nice.
to read Romeo and Juliet. Maybe
Great.
trying to find things that really interest those students.
Right, connecting them with something contemporary to understand something more historical and make them care somehow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I put out a few points, just so that we know what we're talking about.
I want
Yes?
to say something.
Please.
When you exchange communication with other students from other countries,
Mm-hmm.
when you're in the classroom, they can see how other students study and work and what they're doing in other areas of their environments.
Nice.
So they connect. Everyone's connected now, so they can exchange communication, knowledge.
Yeah.
I've done that with
Great.
I have a teacher that was here before, now she's in another country, and sometimes she calls and then the other students can meet other students.
Nice.
They gain knowledge from them in classes.
So extending the classroom remotely, right? Using the existing communications technology in a new way in the classroom. Okay, great.
So, ahora muy bien, y audiencia, usaron ejemplos de innovación, tratar de entender, nosotros entendemos por innovación, y a punto seguido, ella va a hablar más de exactamente qué es innovación para la
Maybe that one. No. Okay. Okay, so I put a couple of, just so that we know what we're talking about when we're talking about innovation for education, I just put a couple points down. First of all, we talk about it as human-centered. So yes, of course, the students are the center, but also the teachers, the staff, the parents, the community, and we're talking about innovation is progress. We want positive change. And we're also thinking about, kind of the well-being of the student, not necessarily just grades and getting into university and what used to be. We're thinking about the whole student. This is very much the same as here at the new school. We're also thinking about equity. ¿Cuál es el translation de
valor.
Equidad.
El valor que crea la innovación dentro de, en este caso, dentro de un colegio, dentro de una universidad.
Yeah. So when we talk about innovation, we're also in education, we want to reach as many students as possible, not just in the schools, but kind of in society. And innovation can help, the people that aren't going to school as much as the top, okay? We're also looking at significant innovation, so something that we call at scale. So if one thing is happening in the classroom, okay, is it happening in every grade, in every classroom? Is it part of the curriculum? Is it part of the system? Is it part of the pedagogy? Is it so significant in education that everybody starts doing something different. So when we say at scale, we talk about impact and a lot of people doing
Eso quiere decir que la innovación no se debe limitar a una sola ensayo o una sola ejemplo, como una sola clase, nada, sino que se necesita expandir a través o de un diferente número de estudiantes, un diferente número de clases, y el ideal sería que todo el colegio se participe de esa innovación.
That's right. So when we talk about scale, as I was saying, for example, many people did use Zoom before. They had video conferences. A lot of companies used it. But when we had the pandemic and everybody was at home and you couldn't travel, all of a sudden it was an innovation at scale. So it was always there. Zoom has been there for like 12 years, but now when human behavior is changing, it's at scale. Okay. And then of course it's systematic, right? So it's affecting the whole organization and it's affecting how we think about learning and teaching. So innovation can be big, it can be disruptive, okay? And then the last thing I want to say, it has to add value, okay? So innovation, you can't just do it and give everybody computers and Zoom, and you have to sustain a business. And it has to add value, and that value can be social, it can be cultural, it has to improve people's lives and improve the system itself.
En general, la innovación debe ser, o el objetivo de la innovación debe ser generalizado, no simplemente en un solo punto, sino que a todo el mundo, afecte a todo el mundo y todo el mundo activamente hace parte del proceso.
So I just really want to quickly talk more about innovation. This is innovation, business, science, in every industry. There are different types of innovation. Most of the innovation we see is kind of incremental. So it happens little by little, okay? Small improvements. And then something might shift and that will become something that's disruptive or a breakthrough, okay? Like I was talking about with Zoom. Also, you can have innovations in processes and services. And so that's like in the way you teach, in the way things are done. A lot of innovation everybody thinks about is like, for example, functional innovation. So on your cell phone, you know what continuous scroll is? So before you had to press a page and it would change. And then somebody decided, oh, it's easier if you can kind of scroll, right? And it was just a small incremental programming change of how you viewed a website. However, infinite scroll had a huge disruptive effect. It created total addiction, right? We can all spend hours and hours scrolling. This was a very small technical function that became an innovation.
El proceso de innovación también debe ser entendido y usado de una forma productiva. La innovación puede ser de un individuo mejorando un sistema un poquito, pero puede ser que llegue al extremo, como cuando uno scroll o pues recorre una página y empieza a aparecer. Entonces esa innovación pues realmente no es tan efectiva. Entonces lo que se busca es que la innovación no sea simplemente tan pequeña ni tan grande, pero que sea efectiva.
So this is around innovation for education. So if I'm thinking about, I want to explain to you what different kinds of innovation that is happening in education, but honestly, it's happening right here at the new school as well. I've kind of seen it and I've taught in talking to you guys, it's a very innovative culture, in fact. So, but how do we think about the innovations that are happening? So there's innovations, of course, in teaching and learning, in pedagogical. This means how you teach. So a lot of people are flipping the classroom. They're kind of being project-based. They're doing different kind of dynamic, more physical things, using more media, all sorts of things. People are using games, using games And also innovations in curriculum. A lot of people are using, I can see that you have a VR and a physical computing lab. That's really innovative in education. There's innovations in kind of using data. So I don't know if you do it here, but you use the data that you have from students or teachers or even using data from other, from outside of the school to drive change or drive policy, drive all kinds of things. Evaluation and assessment. So an example of innovation and evaluation is no marks, no grades. Let's change that system, okay? Innovation in leadership and organization and your business model. I know you guys use distributed leadership. That's quite an innovative way to kind of run the leadership of the school. So there's many different ways. I see innovation in learning spaces. So, the example of Galleria Click, which is a new space, that's an innovative space, right? So it's the environment as well, right?
So, innovación, afortunadamente, tenemos suerte de que el New School está muy avanzado en innovación, pero incluye cada una de estas partes, por ejemplo, en entrenamiento para profesores, para usar métodos pedagógicos, también innovación en el currículum, que se debe hacer, hacerlo diverso, en forma digital, que se pueda usar todos los computadores como hoy lo estamos haciendo, incluir la tecnología, tiene que ser también manejado o basado en la información que hemos recogido de nuestras experiencias. Después, obviamente que hay una organización y un liderazgo para hacer un modelo de negocio que eso sea, y llega así, cruzando todas estas cosas como están las líneas blancas, se ve que hay una interrelación entre cada uno de estos factores para ser innovativos en educación.
And of course, all of these innovations affect each other. That's why I did the little connections. They're all connected. Everything is connected. So I see this very much happening in the new school. I think the model, the mandala that you have is about innovation. And I just want to make the point that all the innovation in education is human-centered. It's about creating a better culture, creating better relationships. It's human-centered innovation. It's not coming from the outside just with, with that new technologies. It's really very much about creating community and teacher training and sharing information. Okay. So this is a quote, one of my favorite quotes. In university or in K to 12, I kind of think about innovation as increasing efficiency and kind of getting people to learn more and learn better. And I like this because this is around that you can really discover more playing with someone than talking to them, So, I see a lot of play here as well. And playfulness is really important when we're thinking about innovation.
En este caso, es increíble que Platón ya estaba conociendo esto, añadiendo eso, con esa frase que dijo, que si usted puede descubrir más sobre una persona en una hora de juego que en un año de conversación. Y por eso la innovación es tan importante y tan servicial, y que afortunadamente en el New School sí se está usando, pero es para hacerlo general.
And this is an example. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but you have like marshmallows and you have sticks, and you can get a whole group of architects, and actually the 5-year-olds will make a higher tower than the architects because they're playful and because they don't have the boxes to think outside of, right? Okay, so thank you. That's the theory part about innovation. I haven't really introduced myself yet. I'm going to introduce myself very quickly. We're talking about empathy. We're talking about human connection, so I thought I would introduce myself.
Voy a hablar un poco de mi historia, quién soy yo.
So I'm Ling. I was born one of three sisters to my parents are immigrants from Hong Kong, from China. Yeah, I grew up in Canada and Hong Kong. Claro. This is a picture that I really like because I'm actually about 8 or 9, same age as Phoenix. And actually you can see we're in Canada. You can see the forest, the Canadian forest behind us. And actually I'm at a multicultural festival. So it was a culture of immigrants. Everyone was from different places. And I'm actually in front of the stage, the Columbia stage. And mira, maybe un país no sé, pero that's what I thought of Colombia. Oh, everybody is coffee and they're wearing. So it's interesting what you first think of other people, what you first think of cultures. This is some of my family. It's a little family reunion. I have 14 tias y tios, and I have a big family all over the world, America, Europe, Asia. We're all kind of mixed. And this is because they had a different cultural practice. Back then, my abuelo had 4 wives, four mamas, so she had 14 children. And it was normal until 1970s or so for a kind of upper class to have more than one wife. So,
Se usaba en ese momento que eran unas familias muy grandes, pero también la explicación de esas familias grandes era la procedencia y era muy usual en la cultura de ellos tener hasta 4 esposas. Y por eso, pues, obviamente, con se decía el número de ellos.
okay, so I know.
Eso se terminó en 1970.
I know that I know that there's very big families in Colombia as well in the last generation, but because of my family, I became very interested in something called ethnography. Do you know what ethnography is? It's kind of the study of culture, but it's also the study of how power and influence and identity happens in a system, in kind of a cultural system. So it's the study of a culture from inside the culture. So I ended up studying ethnography and international relations at university. I got 2 degrees, one in international relations and cultural studies, and one in multimedia. And then I went on to work in creative agencies as a creative director in communications agencies in about 5. And I worked with 3 Olympics. And I kind of made the pavilions for different sponsors and different places. Different, every country has a pavilion at the Olympics, and I worked in that for quite a while. So for 3 Olympics, for Beijing, Vancouver, and some in London. Then I got married to a Colombiano Canadian Spanish, and I had 1 child. I teach at a university, 2 or 3 universities in London, and I've had the pleasure of having, around maybe 100 and maybe around 200 students graduate. Some of them now hire me, which is really nice to work with students that have graduated. I teach design, management, cultures, and innovation. And sometimes I work, I consult inside boardrooms for companies. This is before the pandemic. We did a lot of work with companies around things changing their mindsets, changing innovation. And after the pandemic, I've done about 100 online workshops, classes, training, sometimes for like car companies or train companies and different startups, and for students. So that was my story, my life story, very quickly. I was wondering, why do you think I told you that? How was I trying to influence your thinking?
Eso es un ejemplo de cómo ella haber contado la historia. ¿Cómo creen ustedes que ha cambiado su percepción o su... ¿Por qué?
To generate empathy, like telling us your story about your family, that through your family, that's why you studied and design thinking,
Yeah,
that motivated you. to-
exactly, yeah. I wanted to create empathy.
Bonds, you're creating like bonds, and you're seeing you as a person and not as a person that presents you.
Yes, I
You can
wanted to
relate.
create bonds. I wanted you to relate with me. Maybe you can relate to some of the things. Yeah, I wanted to, yeah,
A volvernos más cercanos. Cuando uno aprende de la persona que está enseñando lo que ha vivido, uno se vuelve más cercana a ella y la siente más de uno.
personal, sí. Yeah. Feel closer? Anything else? No. I wanted you to think I know what I'm saying. I wanted you to think I'm credible, right? So there's a lot, I just wanted to, part of the reason I did this is because I want us to think about how we think. So we know that people make very big decisions and judgments very quickly. And we don't actually think very rationally about it. We don't think about, oh, there's all this information and you make a rational decision. No, you make a decision very quickly. I like her. I want to buy this. You know, we make it from kind of behavioral psychology and economics. We know that people buy because they feel, you know, excited. We know that people vote, you know, not necessarily for the best person, but for the person that they think they like, you know. So in this world of all this information that we have, actually we make decisions very quickly. So in doing this, when you think about things like teaching and education, you know, I'm not talking about, oh, that student is my favorite because, you know, I feel emotionally bonded with them. I'm talking about like different ways that we're always making judgments and we're always kind of thinking about what's best. Claro?
Sí, esto ya es pasando, a ver, yo voy a hacer yo una manifestación. Es extraño que ella puso su CV en toda la mitad de la conversación y los puso a pensar a todos, y esa era la idea que ella tenía. Y entonces ahora va a decir, ya vemos por qué al cambiar de algo, aquí se dice, hombre, vamos a ver cómo, si se puede hacer un cambio racional o un cambio justamente como una reacción emocional.
Very
Yes.
instinctive. We do a lot of this with what we call our primitive brain.
Esa es nuestra mente primitiva.
Okay, so one of the things that we know, this is quite a crazy infographic, but it's around cognitive biases. So we make decisions all the time. We have to make shortcuts. We have to think quickly. We have to do things quickly. So this is cognitive biases are how we see the world, you know. It's not always accurate, right? It's not always correct, but we have a lot of assumptions, you know. We think that we know stuff that maybe isn't true, right? Now I want to zoom in a little bit. So for example, right, we tend to find stories and patterns even when we don't have a lot of information. There's something called optimism bias, and I have a lot of optimism bias. I think I can do more than I can do in the time that I have. I'm not realistic about it, you know? Other things are like, for example, it's called spotlight. So social media works on this idea that everybody thinks that they are like, everybody's looking at them when no one's actually looking. So you have this kind of narcissism that you think, that people are watching you. Right now, you're all watching me, but you know, that social media works on that. Another one is the empathy gap. So we talked a lot about empathy last week, and a lot of people said that empathy is so important. But actually, a lot of empathy is a bias that you think that what you value, what you want, is what other people want, right? So because we have this empathy bias, you know, a lot of times we're creating services and products that we think that we would want, but not necessarily the other people want. Okay?
Este esquema que hizo es varias formas de cómo es el cerebro trabaja. Por ejemplo, la última que estaba hablando era de empatía, ¿verdad? Que cree que uno que tiene que ser empático con alguien que no puede ser o que no necesita ser. De modo que existen miles de ejemplos de cómo si no es simplemente no es suficiente, pero que tenga significado lo más importante.
Okay, another quote from Albert Einstein is, you know, we cannot solve all of the problems that we have using the same kind of thinking that we created the problems with. So how are we going to think differently? We need to kind of understand how we are thinking, to be aware of our biases. And this is happening a lot now with ideas of racism and sexism. You know, we're becoming aware, oh, I have that bias. And this is really an important part of critical thinking, especially for educators, to kind of, you know, think and talk about and understand themselves, their identities, where they come from, how they see the world, in order to educate the next generation to kind of understand themselves.
Only I have a simple question that you told us that the process of innovation has to be systematic, right? So in this way, not all the people in our organization like the innovation. They fear the innovation. They think that they scared of innovation. So if it is systematic, so what can we do with this kind of people that had a lot of fear of innovation?
So,
because if we are all in this process of innovation, yes, the innovation is going to be great. It's going to be a goal. But what happened with the people that it doesn't have this road, it doesn't have this goal?
So it's interesting that you say that, because again, in a way, that's a bias in thinking that leadership is afraid, or that they don't think they're innovative, because everybody thinks they're innovative. So this leads to my next question, is design thinking. So design thinking is a process of innovation that tries to kind of work against biases. And how do we do it? We do it through collaboration, having very diverse teams, and having a culture of openness. So, for example, really a lot of sharing. So the exercise we're going to do later is a little example of it. But I'll just explain a bit of design thinking, and you can kind of start to understand, oh, maybe we can use some of this to create a culture of openness. Because if everybody is admitting, you know what, I was kind of biased. When I first met you, I kind of thought you were like this.
So
And
before we get involved in an innovation process, we have to do some steps to prepare the people for innovate, right?
And that's why we did the workshop in a way, is because in a way we're getting to know each other in a different way. We're playing together, getting to know each other as humans. There needs to be trust in a team that you can come up with the best solutions, you know, and be innovative together, and that it benefits everyone, right?
I think it should be a balance about it, because there is a common idea that innovation is like left everything behind and start from zero ground.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's not even possible because if you want to solve a problem, you need at least to understand what are the characteristics of the problem, what are the concepts that explain the situation of the problem. Sometimes innovation is no other thing than reorganize stuff, to think out of the box, or to try to see the things in other way,
yeah,
but the same things and the same ideas around. So it's kind of that bias is something that we can avoid, but we do rationally. But try to think out of the box. It's quite like fresh view, but it's the same thing. And innovation of the best ideas, the best new ideas. A lot of times we're just another way to connect a table or another way to tap something to overthink.
yeah.
And the solution at the end of this seems really simple and it's like really things that nobody else have think before that.
And I think that kind of thinking can be taught. And I think design thinking, it's not, you know, we kind of think outside the box, right? But actually it really starts with just talking to understanding a person, right? So for example, you know the app Headspace is a meditation app. So does anybody know this app? It's like it's a very famous meditation app, really popular. So it was created by this guy that was a meditation teacher and a monk. And he actually created it for somebody that was partly autistic, had Asperger's. So he created a very simple, minimal program to help them meditate. Not a lot of talking, no visuals. And so he created it for a very specific person, right? And boom, you know, everybody's using it, okay? So human-centered innovation is around doing it for a very specific human, and then it will scale.
But I think sometimes in a water is basically centered in activities and processes and machines. Think out of the box, it's basically go inside because.
Go inside the box.
Yeah. But the box is something like, in some cases, it's some experience, some practical.
Yeah.
It's not a machine problem.
Exactly.
Maybe think out of the box sometimes is concise. For example, a production of something problem, not as a problem of as only engineering problem, but a human problem.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Exactly.
the solution is to do it. See other perspectives, because probably the math solution or the engineering solutions are 100% sure, but something else is missing, and sometimes this missing part is outside, but outside is look for another perspective.
Yeah. And I'm
Don't put that much value, that perspective of human feeling and human emotion and human
behavior.
experience.
Yeah, so yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that when you sit back and observe and see how somebody uses something, then the innovations are coming because you're saying, oh, why did that child use it in that way, you know? Okay, so I'm gonna continue on with design thinking. So design thinking is a process that is kind of bringing the design, some of the design ideas into the innovation process. I don't know if you've seen this before, but the process is, these are two models of design thinking that are very standard. The first one is from IDEO, and it says empathize. So get to know your user first. Try to start to define who they are, what they need, and then you need to frame a problem, okay? And then you come up with a lot of ideas, solve the problem, then you prototype, you make little samples and kind of test, and then you kind of continue. Now, this is called the IDEO design thinking, and the other one is called the double diamond. And this double diamond is very similar to this. Instead of empathize, it says listen and discover, okay? So you're watching, you get a lot of information, and then you're kind of defining what you want to solve, what problem you want to solve. And then you come up with a lot of ideas, you develop a solution, and then you start to pick different solutions that you can prototype quickly to see if it works. And you can do many at once, okay? And then you learn, and it's not really linear, but it's kind of always happening, right? So when I just want to talk about this process of diverging and converging, okay? So this idea of getting a lot of information and making sense out of that information, and then kind of coming together to make choices. So in the process, you have to choose direction, right? And usually you think your boss should choose the direction, but actually in design thinking, it's a group. It's a group that does this. You vote, or you kind of, use different ways to prototype different solutions. Okay, design thinking is a process, but it's also it's a set of tools, which I think some of you probably use, and it's a mindset. It's a bunch of principles, and it's also a way of planning a project. So I've kind of been through a lot of design thinking projects. This can be 1 week project. This can be 1 month. This can be a 1 year project. So a lot of times we plan kind of according to this kind of time scale. Now here you have a general challenge, okay? And then you're looking at tools to research to kind of, so for example, say we want to teach a certain number of students better, okay? So we're going to ask them questions, we're going to watch them, we might talk to their parents, different ways to get information about what is happening for that user. Then you have all this information and you need to define what problem, what kind of issue you want to kind of focus on. And then you're going to, so this part here is the problem. Half of the process is finding the right question, is finding the right problem. And then the second part of the process is kind of coming up with ideas and prototyping and kind of creating some deliverables. Any questions around this?
Well, what happens if in this process of innovation you doesn't solve the problem? You have to restart. I know,
Absolutely.
But
I mean, but there's so many places along the way that you're going to understand
Okay.
that not the right thing is happening. you
Okay.
see? I'm going to show you an example.
Okay.
Okay. So some of the principles, some of the mindsets that I just want to talk about is everything we've been talking about. It's kind of like you're not at the beginning, you're looking at people's needs, but they're involved in the whole process. So the best kind of design thinking sprints or best projects are when the people who are being affected are part of the team. So if you're creating solutions for students, students need to be part of the team, right? It's called co-creation. We also are optimistic. So we always think that we can make something better. We can improve the experience for them. A lot of collaboration. Now, I know we talk a lot about collaboration, but in a lot of different ways. This is how we kind of, when you have a lot of diverse voices, you can kind of start to see your own biases, right? So it's through collaboration and very diverse teams. So the very famous people that did design thinking, they always had many different cultures and many different disciplines on one team. So you'd have an engineer, a mother, a designer, a student, a kind of scientist. So it has to be really coming from different perspectives, right? I don't know how diverse your teams are in your peoples, but this is why you're kind of working on teams. There's no boss and kind of worker on teams. The teams should be very democratic, okay? The other thing is that you do a lot of making, you do a lot of doing. So you have an idea and then you try to create what's called a rapid prototype. So you might act it out, you might kind of ask people questions on paper. There are different ways to test your ideas quickly. Okay? I'm going to show you a case study from my university that we did last year. So I found that the students online were really, they weren't connecting, they weren't learning as much as I hoped. So here's like an example of a kind of a learning model where if you're in your comfort zone, you're not actually learning. You kind of have to push through the fear zone in order to kind of learn something. And then there's a learning and the growth zone, right? So I wanted to push the students because I found that people weren't caring, they weren't kind of motivated, right? Yeah.
Este es un ejemplo claro de lo que ella ha hecho en la universidad de ella, donde muestra el proceso de una innovación. Y es que primero la gente no se sentía segura de lo que estaba pasando. Entonces pasó a la zona ya no de que no sabían, pasó a un proceso de temor. Y ya habiendo superado la zona de temor, ya empieza la zona de aprendizaje y a través del aprendizaje se llega al crecimiento de la persona que está afectando.
So one of my challenges was how could I push the students into the fear zone, right? This is also something I find interesting. It's kind of around the types of learning. So actually, when I'm lecturing at you, you actually only remember 5% of it. Lecturing is not a good way to teach, actually. In a way, the best way to teach is for students to be the teachers, right? So this is why we talk about flipped learning. So I wanted to push people to do practice by doing and to be the teachers, okay? So I'm just going to show you the project.
Can you go back so I can take a picture of the?
Sure.
Thank you.
So this area here we call is passive learning, right? You're kind of showing things, your people are listening and you're demonstrating things, then you get them to discuss, and this is more active learning, right? But really, it's interesting that through teaching, you know as teachers that you have to learn, you learn a lot when you have to prepare a lesson, right? It's the best way of learning. Okay? Okay, so I have to do it like this. So we did a hackathon for the students, and we made them be the teachers and the facilitators. Okay? Now, do you know what a hackathon is? You guys know what a hackathon is? So it's an intense period of time where students work, or we could be doing a hackathon. It's like a sprint where you work in groups to solve a problem, okay? And you have a challenge. And the challenge for this, let's see, was here. So what if, and it was during the pandemic, so what if at this moment of disruption, our systems of learning be redesigned to eliminate the inequities that are embedded in our schools and our communities? Or how might we help educators, parents, and students adapt to remote learning and at the same time use this moment to reimagine the education system? So this was the general kind of challenge that the students had. Okay? You want to read that? Okay. Okay, so we got the older students to be the teachers, to be the facilitators. We got the second year students, the middle ones, to be the designers, the design thinkers. And then the youngest students were the users. They were interviewed and then they helped co-design. Okay? And hackathons are very, yeah.
Thank you.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so the teams were in mixed years, so they got to know each other, but basically because the third years had to teach, they had to know what they were teaching. Okay. So now we kind of gamified it. Most hackathons are competitions. So you you come up with a solution, you come up with a prototype, and somebody wins, right? So there were judges, and there was a very strict time. So here were the guest judges, right? And then here were some of the, I'm going to show you some of the things that the students did. So remember, they have to do the whole process in 3 days. So I'll show you so they have to interview people. Let's see if this works. Oh, no, the sound isn't playing. So they have to interview each other and find problems that students have, okay? So for example, the ones that won, was this one. They came up with an app for unmotivated students, okay? They came up with this app for unmotivated students. So they kind of made it a game, and they said, okay, you are a student and I'm a teacher, someone else is a mentor. You have to choose a character and you have to play a role. And it became a game to help motivate each other to study and motivate each other to get up and go to class. And so they created this kind of, chat box. Now it took 1 hour to kind of make this because it's very easy to do online. But, they really thought about who do you want in your life? A student needs a mentor, they need a friend, they need a teacher. And it all came from interviewing some unmotivated students, right? So there's an example. Now, look, we had 8 teams come up. They came up with the team name, they came up with a user, they came up with a problem, a lot of ideas, and they came up with a solution. Now, I want to show you the very same challenge, what other people came up with, because this was an ideal challenge from last year. This is from Peru, and they, instead of choosing students, they chose teachers. So they interviewed some teachers, and they wanted to know what problems the teachers had by having to change to remote learning. And they came up with this idea of a teacher platform to connect and share, okay? So they call it OIPROF, and it's a laboratory of collaboration for education. And they connected teachers, and you could teach, you could connect with other teachers. There was a big library of lessons. And then you could also, if you had a problem, you could ask other teachers, okay? So this kind of grew, and it was all from like a one challenge, right? So in these design thinking sprints, you have the same challenges and very different ideas come up, right? This project was from Ethiopia, and they focused on parents. So in the pandemic, a lot of parents had to do homeschooling. And so they created a parent coaching platform, okay? So they always start with empathy. What are the parents going through? What's their problems? How can they help? How could they help and share kind of homeschooling ideas? And then they also started to share information about the different, what happened in COVID and the different shutdowns and so forth. So this is an example of kind of how design thinking can work with different groups and different users. And you just notice that it's all based on that first understanding of empathy, of understanding who you're designing for. Okay, so we are going to do a little exercise. This is the last quote, and it's from a business thinker that I really like, and he talks about how asking a good question is going to could make you come up with new answers. So questions are places in your mind where answers fit. The right answer is impossible unless you ask the right question. Okay, so for the activity, I I would like you to take your sheets of paper. Maybe you can help me.
Ahora vamos a empezar con el ejercicio. Repartieron unas tarjetas al principio.
We'll do it. It'll only take less than 10 minutes, okay? Less than 5 minutes. I can do it very quickly.
Ojalá lo pudiéramos hacer más rápido, pero puede tomar entre 5 y 10 minutos.
Okay. I want you to close your eyes for just a minute.
¿Quieres todo?
Okay. I want you to think about,
Todos y todas cierren los ojos.
I want you to visualize somebody in the school. It could be a student. It could be a teacher. It could be a parent. It could be a graduate. Someone that you would like to help. Someone that's on your mind. Okay.
Piensa en alguien al que usted cree que puede ayudar.
Do you have someone in mind? Okay, so open your eyes. So at the top of your card, I would like you to, I don't want you to write the person's name. I want you to write a very quick sentence about who it is. So for example, here I put, I'm thinking about a grade 8 boy, a grade 8 boy, okay? And he's always sleeping in my English class, okay? And so just write a sentence, and also you can draw. Sometimes, so I drew a little thing about a kid sleeping, okay? But it could be anyone. It could be a teacher that's having, who's maybe young and needs more confidence. It could be anyone.
En el tope de la tarjeta, por favor, escriba la descripción o el nombre o la persona que usted pensó que la podría ayudar.
Just a very short description, like 6 words, 6 to 8 words.
6 palabras máximo.
And just let me know when you're done.
Individualmente, déjenos saber cuándo usted termina.
Okay, so no names, just a little description of the person, okay?
No se necesita el nombre, simplemente una descripción rápida de la persona o en la que usted le podría ayudar.
Now, in design thinking, we try to frame questions that are open-ended, that don't have a solution inside them, right? So, and we use kind of a formula, okay? So I would like you to write this, please. So write, how might we?
Usando entonces este sistema de 3 cuadritos, por favor escriba en cada uno de los cuadros lo siguiente. Dice, empezando con la frase, ¿cómo podría yo? Entonces usar un verbo en ese momento. Por ejemplo, ayudarlo, o animarlo, o empoderarlo, gracias, y o soportarlo. En la segunda, obviamente el nombre o el sujeto que ustedes pueden describir en una sola palabra. Y en la tercera, ¿cuál es lo que a usted le gustaría ayudarlo o que lo sienta o que lo logre y que se necesita para llegar a ese estado deseado?
So how might we help, enable, encourage, support, and keep thinking about your person? So how might we, verb, the next thing is the subject. So if you use your 8-year-old boy, you could say sleepy 8-year-old. 2, and then the last part is what their need is or what they want the desired state to be. So here's an example here. So I wrote, how might we motivate, okay, sleepy 13-year-old to become more interested in English and feel the importance of it in his real life, okay? Make sure that there's no solution in the last part. So don't say to use computers to, or to make friends to, just, it needs to be open.
Entonces, cada uno que tiene una carta ahora, una tarjeta, escriba entonces en ese espacio de la parte de abajo de la tarjeta de cómo usted podría hacer eso, pero no lo haga.
Don't put the solution inside.
No pongan la solución efectivamente, sino cómo lo podrían hacer.
And just put your hand up when you're done.
Y entonces levante su mano si ha entendido y si lo ha hecho.
Great. You guys are good. We should do a workshop on this next time. Okay, so I want you to look at it and read it for yourself. And is this a problem that you would like to solve? Yeah? Okay. I want you to put your initials on the bottom, just your initials.
Poner las iniciales en el fondo de la tarjeta, en la parte de abajo.
And now I want you to give the card to the person behind or in front. So I want you to exchange cards.
Darle la tarjeta a una persona que no sea, sino que esté de atrás o adelante. No
So
parte de eso.
everybody should have somebody else's card.
No se puede cambiar entre los mismos amigos. Se tiene que dar hacia atrás o hacia adelante. Ahorita en la fila 50, por favor. No, hacia atrás o hacia adelante.
Has everybody exchanged? Rápido.
Rápidamente.
Have you guys changed? Anita, you have somebody else?
¿Cómo están? ¿Están todos ya hicieron el cambio? Si todos hicieron el cambio, entonces continuaremos.
Okay. Now don't talk about it.
Nunca hable con el otro ni con los vecinos acerca de la pregunta o la solución que le dio el problema.
Now, can you read the problem from the other person? Don't ask them about it, just read it. Okay?
Lea la pregunta de la otra persona, no comentándole a la persona con que intercambió, sino simple para ustedes.
Okay. So we're going to do a little bit of ideation. It means we're going to try and solve this problem with a lot of ideas. So I want you to come read it, and I want you to come up with many different ideas. For instance, for me, for example, okay, I could, like, brainwriting, yeah, exactly. So you can write anything. You can write, oh, for example, I can, I can play a very loud music to wake him up. I could bring in a very pretty English girl to talk to him. I could alter, as many as you can, but you only have 2 minutes to solve the other person's problem, okay?
El ejercicio ahora es, ya que no tiene usted en su tarjeta, sino la del vecino, entonces trate de poner allí la solución a lo que el vecino escribió que tenía para dar una solución a la situación de la persona. Simplemente, sin cuestionar a su vecino, simplemente haga esto.
Many different ideas. And you can, they don't have to be realistic. The technology doesn't have to exist. It doesn't have to be realistic at all. And you can use the other side as well. So write as much as you can. So we'll do it silent and solo for 2 minutes.
Lo haremos en solitario y en silencio por los próximos 3 minutos. en silencio y en solitario, para el señor de la tercera fila en el centro.
Forty seconds.
40 segundos de queda.
Ten seconds.
10 segundos.
Okay. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I'm sorry we went over. I would just like you can give the card back to the person whose problem it was.
Devolverle la tarjeta al original.
Momento,
Momento, no hace mucha bulla, por favor.
just read.
Atención, atención. Gracias. Los comentarios de Ana Recreo.
Okay. Does anybody want to share one of the ideas?
¿Alguien se atreve a compartir las ideas que les dieron a su problema o a su análisis o a su ejemplo?
Any example?
I encourage this driver to socialize with other students and express their feelings. So the idea was looking for her to chance to get in situations where she can be more involved, changing roles, speaking with her about the reason, asking her about her background, asking her about her needs, eye contact, making her feel special.
Okay. Anybody else want to
En
share?
español, por favor.
Ah,
¿Cómo puedo llevar a una niña que es tímida a que socialice más con otros estudiantes y después entonces, ayudarla a que ligue, crear situaciones en las que ella esté más involucrada, cambiando roles con otros, hablando con ella acerca de las razones de por qué ella es así, preguntarle acerca de ella, de su historia, darle lo que ella quiere, lo que necesita, hablar siempre con ella mirándola a los ojos y hacerla sentir especial.
Okay, we're quite over. Otherwise, I would love to share. It's just a little example of how we can collaborate. If we had more time, I would get you to send it to another person and another person. Thank you for listening. If there are any other questions, you can come up and ask me and Jose. Gracias.
De modo, muchas gracias. Gracias.
Magda, diga duro.
One moment, please.
Oscar, que no se vayan. Ve.
Profesores, desde la defensa se va a hacer como un pequeño detallito para que les lleve la prueba de café que tenemos en la despensa. Entonces van a pasar por este lado, van a llevar una muestra, se van a tomar un buen café